Welcome to MINDSHOCK. This is your host, Pierce McGuire. And today we are unveiling hundreds upon hundreds of hours of research, deducing the main catalyst for the decline of Western civilization. No small undertaking, literally decades in the making. If you want to help support the podcast, help logic and reason return to a world where it is quickly going extinct, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure to subscribe, like, and share. Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, and Patreon. Patrons do give priority for case topic, logical analysis, co-podcast, or requests. You could also be a guest in the podcast depending on your tier. If you're not getting updates through YouTube, you could even sign up for the free tier on Patreon, and you should be able to get all your updates through there. You could also help support the podcast by becoming a YouTube member right here on YouTube. We got some exclusive member content coming in the near future. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. Alright, who's ready for this? Are we just going to hit the ground running right away with the big reveal? Or should we see if anybody in the chat can guess if they came up with the same catalyst as yours truly? Welcome everyone here. Vlad B, Lord Zed, South to West, Adam, Heracles, BB, Truth Trollette. Anybody want to take some guesses in the chat before I do the big reveal? Obviously. Supported by so many receipts. If you haven't checked out the Steven Seagal series, see how receipts can drown haters. I mean, we got some serious receipts. We got receipts analyzing hundreds of thousands of data points here. Heracles says, I'm going to guess smartphones. That's a pretty good one. Now, keep in mind, this is an umbrella. So this is a catalyst in terms of what set everything else in motion and opened the door. So, obviously, smartphones, social media, TikTok, brain rot, all that stuff is a factor, but not a catalyst. I would argue the catalyst was set in motion before all of this. Heracles says, I believe Western civilization was doomed in the 1500s. I should have said modern Western civilization. Like, let's say the past half century or so. BB says the reptilians. That's a good one. That's a good one. You know what? The reptilians might be behind the catalyst. The interdimensional reptilian shapeshifters. If you haven't checked out that series on MINDSHOCK, check that out. The most comprehensive analysis on that theory. Now, this is the catalyst itself, not necessarily the reason, like, not necessarily what caused the catalyst or what's behind the catalyst. I was after what is the actual catalyst, not who set the catalyst in motion or who was behind it, if there were string pullers behind it. Which I think there were. I definitely think there were, but I'm not sure. I think it was also happening. You know, how much of it was happening organically versus string pullers? That'll be an interesting dissection later on. But I don't think we can fully attribute this to string pullers. Heracles says postmodernism is the modern West's downfall. I mean, in what context? So postmodernism can refer, I mean, you're talking architecturally, philosophically. I mean, how are we going to break this down? Postmodernism. How can we break down postmodernism? I mean, a lot of people just define it kind of as a word, as more of a like a world view beyond, I guess, boomers. I mean, would that be one way of defining it? Actually, you know what? Let me just look it up on dictionary.com. I've seen it defined so many different ways in so many different contexts. I mean, it wouldn't be a catalyst anyway. It's, So dictionary.com refers to postmodernism as any number of trends or movements in the arts and literature developing in the 70s in reaction to or rejection of the dogma, principles, or practices of established modernism, especially a movement in architecture and decorative arts running counter the practice and influence of the international style and encouraging the use of elements from historical vernacular styles and often playful illusion, decoration, and complexity. Now it comes to, like, how are we going to define modernism? Oh, man. You know what this kind of reminds me? Okay, I got to play the scene of what this reminds me of. Got a little bit of lag here, but yeah, I'm going to play this scene. I think people are probably going to guess the scene, but... Rodney Thomas says, Carol Quigley said the events of 1914 to 1945 were to blame. I'm going to say no. I'm going to say no because I think 1972 was the pinnacle year of modern wealth, with children out earning their parents, and this was obviously, the gold standard being removed and then inflation getting out of control. So 72 was actually the last great year. Everything slowly started going downhill with inflation and otherwise from there. Jobs, everything. So I'm going to disagree with the world wars, although that was a heavy impact, but America came out economically quite well. People were living the American dream post-World War II. I mean, those that survived, obviously. Post-World War II, I mean, you could average salary, get a nice house, you could have 2 to 4 kids, a car, everything owned, 2 vacations per year, live comfortably, just the father working. I mean, I've talked about how feminism has destroyed everything, but I think it was survivable. I have a different catalyst. Now, the ideology of feminism, obviously, I mean, that's definitely a pick. If you're talking about ideologies, if you can only pick one ideology. My catalyst is a non-ideological catalyst. BB said, we had to read a book on postmodernism at my graduate program at an indoctrination facility. It made 0 sense. Well, if we're looking at it through the lens of, let's say, Christian values of modernism in the world of, let's say, America, first world countries of the West, Britain, America, postmodernism would be rejection of the modernism. That's one way to define all of that. I mean, I'm trying to keep this as simple as possible because, I mean, there's so many different definitions, and you could... I mean, it's just wild. I mean, and that might all be by design to just confuse all of this and the feeling. I mean, if you wanted to define postmodernism in a funny way, feelings over facts. Would that be a good way? Flat Bob says, if not the internet, then I would say mainstream media. Oh, let me play this scene. So this is the scene that reminds me of trying to nail down a single coherent, succinct, basic definition of postmodernism. Fair use, obviously. This is all fair use all the time here on MindShock. All fair use all the time.
To clean, no, flush. Here it is. To conceal the source of money as by channeling it through an intermediary. To conceal the source of money.
Doesn't really help us, Michael.
I can't believe what a bunch of nerds we are. We're looking up money laundering in a dictionary.
Yeah, well, you guys can both eat my ass, okay? To clean, no, flush. Here it is. To conceal the source of money as by channeling it through an intermediary. To conceal the source of money.
Doesn't really help us, Michael.
I can't.
Anyway, that's what reminded me of the definition of postmodernism. Okay. All right. So, Lord Zed says, when Terminator went to Arnold instead of OJ, maybe OJ would have gone another route and Kardashians not created. That's a very interesting theory, Lord Zed. I have not heard that one before, I have to say. I have not heard it. Okay, are you guys ready? You want me to just do the big reveal here? Or does anybody want to go through a couple more guesses? How do you guys want to play this? I want to keep this one kind of short, so maybe we should. Okay, Flap-Bob says fire away. So here it is. Matari Sensei says feminism. Yeah, in terms of ideologies, yeah, that one's kind of tough because if we utilize deductive reasoning out of all of the ideologies, if we simply removed feminism, I mean, you'd have strong families. I mean, that would affect the economy. You would have half as or even less of many people working, so there'd be a lot more jobs. They could pay more. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of tough to pick an ideology over that one, but I'm gonna use a non, in terms of like an ideology like feminism or even say Zionism. Some of these ideologies I think could be defeated if not for this catalyst. Flap-Bob says it was when Steven Seagal stopped making movies. It has to be that. Oh man, that's a good one. Well, supposedly he's making Above the Law too, which would be phenomenal. Heracles says, sorry, Bruce, I stepped away. I meant the rejection of beauty and merit. What I'm going to say is tangentially related, sort of. I don't want to say it's rejection of beauty and merit adjacent, but it's like adjacent to adjacent to adjacent several blocks over, but within the same general area. Matari Sensei says nihilism, also sort of related, but that's kind of like a I would say that's more philosophically based. Matari Sensei says relativism. Yeah, this is non-philosophical. So, Although, I mean, I'm sure you could make arguments of overlap, but let's just go right into it. So, I'm going to utilize, obviously, in literature, photography, the arts in general, music, all of this will reflect the catalyst I'm about to reveal here. I know everybody's waiting with bated breath. I'm going to focus on movies just because movies are popular, and I think it'll make the point better than anything else. And just so obviously so. So here it is, folks. I hope everybody's sitting down for this. Drum roll, please. Here's my big reveal. So, when Western civilization, when Western culture ceased to embrace cheesiness or sentimentality, once cheesiness and sentimentality started being seen as negative or bad and something to shy away from or made fun of, in elementary schools and middle schools and high schools, when certain people or ideas or actions started being chastised, oh, that's cheesy or corny. Cheesy and corny. That was the beginning of the end. Now, for people that are still with me, I'm about to drown any of the critics and receipts here, because I'm going to provide several 100,000 data points to prove this in a moment. But let's see what the reactions are before I bring about the receipts. Lord Zed says, when Leonardo DiCaprio got What's Eating Gilbert Grape over Corey Feldman. I mean, just look at how civilization looked like when everybody was being entertained shamelessly by the cheese. I mean, just look at this level of cheese. By the way, that's Sasha Mitchell in the background there from Kickboxer 2, The Road Back, Kickboxer 3, The Art of War, Kickboxer 4, The Aggressor, one of my favorites, by the way, all non-canon. People forgot about those flicks, didn't they? But the great Sasha Mitchell there in the background. But just look at the cheese. Look at the cheesy smiles. The cheesy, unapologetic storylines, week in, week out, fully absorbed and enjoyed by the masses without being made fun of. Oh, you like it? You like something that's cheesy or corny. As soon as the negativity started to creep in, as soon as people started making fun of things that were cheesy and corny, that was the catalyst. That spelled the beginning of the end. I defy anyone to contradict or debunk what I've just put forward. And I await eagerly for that debunk, and then I will present receipts with hundreds of thousands of data points. Well, BB, it's not just about movies or TV shows. So, for example, I mean, even taking a picture with a Polaroid, like you make a big cheesy smile. I mean, people still kind of do that. But look at how many hipsters or edgelords, like the rise of grunge, like it was cool to be bad in quotations. Like it was cool to be dangerous or non-cheesy. Matari Sensei says, I would actually agree, although I would phrase it more as the degradation of innocence. That's actually very interesting. So degeneracy in general, yeah, that's a huge problem, and I talked about that. That brought about, yeah, like I mentioned the show 90210 and Friends. Although those shows were kind of cheesy, they advocated for degeneracy. So there were multiple things going on in parallel. So the moral degradation and degeneration That's definitely a factor. That's a huge factor. But I would argue that some of these happen in parallel. But what I'm about to expand upon here is with the negative outlook, with people making fun and mocking genuine human emotion, just mocking people being happy. Just mocking sentimentality itself. Like, look how many basic movies were made throughout the 90s, or at least the beginning of the 90s, where they were so basic in plot. Good guy, bad guy, inciting incident, this is happy, this is sad. Like, it was super cheesy, but it was fun and entertaining, and there was a genuine humanity to it. And then once that genuine humanity was taken away in favor of what I'm about to get to in a moment, meta was parallel with, oh, that's cheesy, that's corny. All of a sudden, meta was cool. So let's get into meta before I bring the further receipts. So what is meta? Referring to itself or the conventions of its genre, showing or suggesting an explicit awareness of itself or oneself as a member of its category. Cleverly self-referential, a term often describing the most effective tactic available based on in-depth knowledge of a system. Example, making a movie about making movies is meta. A meme about memes is pretty meta. Okay, so meta was also the rise of no longer living or enjoying the moment. Because if you're meta, you're kind of thinking about the moment or thinking about a certain experience instead of just living in it and experiencing it. And this, I believe, was parallel with the chastising of cheesiness, of corniness, of genuine human emotion. When was the last time you saw a movie that was just basic? Good guy, bad guy, something happens, inciting incident. The hero goes through trials and tribulations and emerges victorious. Everything became about the anti-hero, which is kind of cool. I mean, that's kind of cool. Rocky was sort of an anti-hero, but it was still super cheesy. I mean, just when was the last time a genuine mainstream movie was just plain cheesy? And cheesiness without any kind of degenerate woke agenda or any of that crap. Just pure, unadulterated cheese in a basic movie instead of having all these meta aspects to it. Matari Sensei says, it's funny because this is why I mainly watch anime. I think people gravitate to that cheese. Yeah, anime is, so I don't actually really watch a lot of anime, but that's a good point. Anime there's something very human about it, of just connecting to genuine emotions and sentimentality. I know that's present in a lot of anime. But obviously, you can't have as legitimate of a human connection without seeing an actual human face express those emotions. But, yeah, no, anime totally could fit that bill. Flat Bob says, around the time rollerblading stopped being popular because kids ragged on other kids about being gay because they liked rollerblading. You know what, Flat Bob? I don't know if you're joking or not, but that's on point. Were you around for the live where I went over rollerblading? I actually dug up this old documentary on rollerblading and we watched it. We don't have time for that now, but that's a good point. I'm going to have to make a clip of that. BB says, I didn't see the movie, but I saw the trailer. Would Cocaine Bear have been a cheesy movie? I don't think so, because it's not genuine in nature, right? See, if Cocaine Bear was made in the 70s or 80s, it would be genuine, you know what I mean? Like, now Cocaine Bear is made because, oh, it's edgy or cool or it's so ridiculous as a title. Whereas in the 80s, it would be more, I guess organic would be the word. Like they would have genuinely named that not to be edgy, but that's because that what was describing what was on screen. Does that make sense? Flat Bob says, I'm not sure if I was here for that, but yes, I was being serious about that. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's just, I actually don't have an exact year here. We're going to figure it out. We're going to try to nail it down a little bit more to the decade, but I would say somewhere around the mid-90s, which is funny because it coincides with the last great year, which we put, I believe we put it at around 93, 92 or 93, when greatest decade, 80s or 90s. I don't know if that's online currently. I might have to re-upload that if that's not up, or it might be having some copyright issues. Flat Bob says 98, 2000 be my take. It was earlier than that. It was the mid-90s. Oh, you mean for rollerblading? Maybe for rollerblading, but for just the when cheesy became an insult, when cheesy and corny became a genuine insult thrown around by children of all ages, I would have to say 95, 96. I would put it approximately there, which also coincides with the major popularity rise of grunge. Grunge obviously was around earlier, but like it was cool when it became cool to be angry and goth. I mean, a lot of this stuff happened in parallel. Matari Sensei says, I really like this take because I struggle to think of anything I've watched that has actually had the level of cheese I like lately besides cartoons. Yeah, I'm telling you, I put hundreds of hours into this. It sounds so simple, but I've been postulating this exact subject and the exact catalyst for decades. Flat Bob says I have to dip out. Okay, well, check you next time, Flat Bob. You know, I've spent a lot of time on this. Like, I've actually just pondered this endlessly. I don't want to say every day, but many, many days I've just kind of really tried to pinpoint. Like, what was the beginning of the snowball that led us to where we are here? Lord Zed says, Lord Zed says UFC ruined everything. MMA is great, UFC bad. Yeah, I mean, you know, you could say that. You know, Japanese MMA was kind of awesome and epic. Heracles says, just put on the Hallmark Channel. You know what, Heracles? There's a certain amount of cheese, but it's not, I would argue it's not genuine cheese. It's actors phoning it in. Like, are you seriously going to tell me that modern Hallmark movies have anywhere near the level of genuine cheese and sentimentality? Maybe the script does. Maybe. I'm not even gonna, let's grant the script. But the performances are not there because the actors, they genuinely don't want to be made fun of for being cheesy, or they seem sedated. Is it just me, or is like almost all these actors, there's just no genuine charisma? Like, look at any garbage, like even gutter trash movies from the 80s. They're not phoning it in. I mean, they're really giving it their all, even if they're horrible actors. And they're not afraid to be made fun of for giving their all. Like, modern actors are either holding back on their genuine sentimentality, or they're just that sedated. They're just on that many antidepressants or drugs or, you know, that fluoride stare. I mean, it's just not there. Matori Sensei says, yeah, even romantic comedies aren't even the same. Like, what was the last genuine one you saw? I mean, it's everything. It's every genre. It's every genre. Look how fun the 80s horror movies were. I mean, like, I went through this in the Final Destination podcast. If you haven't checked that out, you could check it out. Where I think 2009-ish, the Friday the 13th remake, it was pretty close. And then since then, nothing's really come close. Heracles says, the one problem was forcing DEI onto Hallmark until recently. Heracles says 80s comedies were different. Yeah, because no one was made fun of for being cheesy. Like, people weren't afraid to actually be human. I mean, I would argue that's why Alex Jones is entertaining. Let's throw Alex Jones in here. How entertaining is Alex Jones? I mean, he's like prime Jim Carrey. There was no fear of being made fun of for being cheesy or over the top or whatever. I mean, why? Look at even comedy show or comedy skits like Saturday Night Live, whatever. Even putting the DEI woke nonsense aside, Like, it's like people are terrified to truly be themselves and give 100% in anything. And in cases where maybe they are, it's just they're just lacking the talent. They're just so sedated and fluoridated that even if their 100% is nowhere near what 100% was in the 80s. Lord Zed says, Saved by the Bell, making fun of Screech didn't help. I mean, that was such a cheesy show, though, as a whole, though. So I don't know. I mean, there was always bullying and things like that in various contexts, you know, going back throughout all of history. So I don't know if that would be a major factor. BB says, what's the difference between cheesy and corny versus other types of comedy? I mean, cheesy and corny, it just means over-sentimental, heavy-handed, and emotionally. There's no real difference. And Lord Zed says, because now people look up to clowns like McGregor, not Van Damme. Yeah, look how phoned in. So I actually didn't have, like, the new Roadhouse movie with Gyllenhaal and McGregor. It wasn't as bad as I thought, but just, it's like it didn't have that genuine human soul. Let's put it that way. And it wasn't cheesy, was it? Whereas the original Roadhouse, kind of cheesy and way more awesome. Cheesiness is good. Aaron says, cheesiness denigration wasn't the beginning, it was the catastrophic tipping point into the fast slide. Well, that's kind of what I meant by catalyst, right? Like the inciting incident into it. Obviously, there were precursors that were set in motion by string pullers. Yes, that is true. You know what's... See, I don't even mind McGregor that much, because McGregor making fun of people was kind of funny during his rise in MMA. I mean, at least he was more charismatic and entertaining than it. Like, everybody else is just like a cardboard cutout. But yeah, obviously McGregor's, you know, doesn't hold a candle to Van Damme. Yeah, how cheesy is Van Damme? Like, let's look at the movie Bloodsport. How cheesy is Jean-Claude Van Damme? But, he's one of the cheesiest human beings that ever existed, and simultaneously, one of the most entertaining with the best movie. Miniature Warehouse, it's been a while since I've caught a Bruce McGuire stream. Well, you're on luck, my friend. We are discussing the catalyst to the collapse of the West. Heracles says, Married with Children was the tilting point in making dysfunctional normal. I think it was a factor. Yeah, it was a factor. Matari Sensei says, I think the only really cheesy stuff left is cartoons and content geared towards children. But even that content, have you looked at it recently? It's unwatchable. I mean, it's crap. It has no soul. I mean, that's the problem. You're right, it's cheesier than the stuff for adults. Like, it's more basic and cheesy. But it has no soul. I think the people making it also have no soul. And they're 100, even if they're giving 100%, 100% of a person working today is what? 10% of a person working in the 80s? That's a problem. Matari Sensei says, I watched the Sonic movie recently and it was pretty cheesy. Okay, I haven't seen that. Chin Chin says, is fiat currency going to be discussed at all? No, because I don't think that was a catalyst. I think cheesy humans with soul can defeat fiat currency. All right, so who's ready for the receipts here? Is there anybody doubting my thesis yet? I want to hear from are there any trolls or haters in here? I want to hear some pushback on my theory. Matari Sensei says it was more genuine in the past. Yeah, genuineness and cheesiness are hand in hand, I think, as well. Because now everybody's so terrified of not looking cool. Like, think about it. Back in the 80s and 90s, 80s and before, like early 90s and 80s and before, people weren't worried about not looking cool. They weren't afraid to actually put their humanity forth, whether it was Jim Carrey acting all crazy. Like, people were genuine humans back in the day. Now everybody's a zoned out zombie, but the psychology behind it, they're afraid. They're afraid to be looked at as cheesy. Back when cheesiness wasn't seen as bad, people were free to be humans. Silver Bear says, I'm here for it. Is there any pushback, though? Because I kind of want to address any pushback. Matari Sensei says, I'm all in on because I'm the guy that makes corny jokes and doesn't care about being that guy. Yeah, I always made corny jokes too. BB says, I don't think sitcom movies have nearly enough sway in society to be a catalyst for decline in society. Oh, you'd be surprised. There's a reason Operation Mockingbird exists and the CIA wanted to infiltrate entertainment. Because that alpha brainwave programming in televisions, now back in the 50s, you know, when not as many people had TVs, then no. But once you're moving into the 80s, 90s, and beyond, I mean, they definitely do. They definitely do have a lot of effect. The propaganda is insane. Miniature Warehouse said 0 trolls is a good thing. Now, I was just wondering if anybody really had a problem with my theory, though. Silver Bear says dad jokes are making a comeback. Not much a pushback, just a nudge. Matari Sensei says, I always wondered what made the 80s movies so good. It was the cheese, the genuine human nature, and the lack of meta. I'm going to provide way more. I didn't even really give any receipts yet. I'm about to give the receipts with 100,000, over 100,000 data points, but I just wanted to hear anybody if it thought that I'm completely, is there anybody who thinks I'm completely wrong and off base and has a much better catalyst? Not precursor, not things happening in parallel, but an actually a better catalyst. True Trollette says, drop 'em, Bruce. Billy Labadie says, old timers in the UK will tell you the government made sure everyone had a TV. Aaron says, the takeover of the monetary system is a strong contender, Bruce. It is, but I would still argue, because when did the takeover take place? Are you saying the establishment of the Federal Reserve, the income tax, all that stuff? That was 100 years ago, and again, I mean, humanity just reached great points since then. So not that it wasn't a factor. I'm not talking about factors. Like, there's been plenty of factors. Yes, feminism, take over the monetary system. You could throw, you know, if you're being really, really, well, I don't even want to go there on some of these, but there's a lot of them. We're on YouTube. But yeah, no, there's a lot of factors, but I want to talk strictly catalyst, like the most weighted catalyst. Not that there aren't other catalysts, but the most weighted. BB says, I mean, a lot of people don't watch a lot of movies, and even people who do watch them just move on with their life after watching them. Or so it seems. But the subconscious programming through the alpha brain waves remains. Thomas Bambury says, opioid epidemic. Yeah, but that still doesn't affect as much of a percent of the population as, for example, making fun of cheesiness. Miniature Warehouse says, Fright Night is the best cheese movie I go to when I need to laugh. Heracles says, I kind of think that the Oprahfication of Housewives was huge. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of factors. Since BB says, what about the development of the scientism mindset and modern philosophy that says humans have no inherent value? Yes, definitely. But I would argue that that was able to have such a foothold is because of a lack of cheesiness, a lack of sentimentality. Because if you're totally wired into your emotions and there's no fear of being cheesy, you would reject that nonsense so quick it would never be able to take a foothold. Matari Sensei says, my only pushback would be I think it's better to describe it as innocence. Not necessarily. Like, you could be a cheesy adult who's not innocent. I mean, look at some of the action movies of the 80s. I wouldn't call them innocent per se. I mean, even ones with adult content. They were cheesy, though. They were genuine human nature, though. They had soul. But, I mean, yeah, that did happen in parallel. That happened in parallel. I would say, I mean, if I'm really, really trying to delineate here accurately, I mean, some might call it splitting hairs, but I don't know about that. Accurate delineation, I would say the making fun of cheesiness opened the door for the moral decay. Not that it wasn't already happening, but it kind of opened the floodgates. Aaron says, when monetary control and corruption got to the point where more than one income in a family became a necessity. Well, again, that was in parallel with feminism and all that stuff. So, yeah, I mean, I would call those factors. I don't know if I'd call them catalysts because the increase in inflation was slow, and 1972 was kind of the wealthiest point other than the 1890s. If I got that correctly. I don't have the charts in front of me right now for the economic history lesson. I went over it on a bunch of lives, though. Billy Labadie says, John Wick 1 just stuffs old world buildings we never built in our face to make people think we built them late 18, early 1900. All New York, too. Aaron says, a big part of monetary corruption is the wholesale funding of SRA, human trafficking, and so on. Yes, indeed. Dehumanization. I would argue that the making fun of cheesiness is an aspect of dehumanization. Because you want to be cool. You want to have no emotions. Lord Zed says, the only counter one could possibly have would be the king of cheese. Dr. Phil's hands certainly aren't clean when it comes to all of it. All right, let's get into the receipts, people. Let's get into the receipts. So let's get into some statistical models. But real quick, let's just do another breakdown on metacommunication. Metacommunication is a type of communication that takes place when participants in a conversation comment or provide context for the content being discussed. And of course, social media has kind of made everything meta. Definition, metacommunication typically involves exchanging information between two people about their conversation in its simplest form. Feltham 2017, metacommunication can be defined as communication about communication. Paraphrasing or summarizing, skilled speakers will paraphrase what they said at the end of a conversation to ensure the content of a message is reinforced. Using meta-commentary, making comments such as, I don't know if I'm explaining this well, but can acknowledge and address potential communication barriers. So once again, this is all part of dehumanization and removing yourself from experiencing a moment and instead making it about the moment instead of living in the moment. About analyzing the moment instead of experiencing and living within that moment. And that's why everything was so much more fun pre-meta. I think the meta was one of the missing pieces when we were discussing 80s versus 90s, the better decade. What was the better decade? Because once you're moving into the mid to late 90s and the rise of meta and the making fun of cheesiness and corniness, that was in parallel. Aaron says, I think we can safely say the sweet point was a coincidence of multiple planned trends. Yeah, I'm just arguing that there was a catalyst that was more of a catalyst than other catalysts. BB says, needing to have two incomes to support a middle-class family would have happened even without feminism because it was a development of late-stage capitalism. You mean late-stage corporatism, not capitalism. Capitalism is a free market. There's no free market in a statist system. That would be corporatist. Matari Sensei says, yeah, you know what? I like sentimentality when genuine sentimentality went on the decline. Yeah, I mean, because sentimentality is humanity, to have those emotions and not to be feared, made fun of for not being cool or being too cheesy or whatever. I mean, think about it. Hollywood's golden age was there's all these original movies being made. Nobody's afraid of being cheesy or corny. As soon as movies started being labeled cheesy and corny on a mass scale, that was the beginning of the end. All right, so let's get into the actual receipts now. I think there are some lurkers in here that are still doubting. They haven't learned their lesson from the Steven Seagal podcast. All right, so let's look at this analysis here. So this is analyzing all listed movies in IMDb. So this is every feature-length movie that has an entry in IMDb up to April 2025. Now, I didn't put the 2020s because they're obviously they're a little bit more problematic. So this is only through the 2010s. So in the 50s, there's roughly 8,900 movies. 21% of them have a score of lower than 6.0. And the decade-wide mean rating is 6.98. Now, you can see the decline. I'll make it a little bigger here. Decade after decade, there's a marked decline. Now, obviously, this has to do with how novel movies were. Because in the 50s, first of all, there weren't as many movies, and the film industry was still relatively new. So a lot of movies were by default original, because there just hadn't been that many made. So everything was kind of original up through even the 60s and 70s, and maybe even 80s. Although the 90s still had their fair share of original films. So now in the 60s, we move to 11,700 films. 24% of them have a score of less than 6. The mean drops to 6.88. In the 70s, you have 15,000. I thought there'd be more movies in the 70s. You have 15,600 entries. 26% of them have a score of lower than 6.0. The mean dropped to 6.82. Now, in the 80s, you have 24,400 films. I think there's way more, but anyway. 31% of those have a score of less than 6.0, and the mean drops to 6.65. In the 90s, you have 42,300. 34% have a score of less than 6, and the mean drops to 6.55. By the 2000s, you have 82,100 films. 38% now have a score of less than 6.0, with a decade-wide mean rating of 6.37. By the 2010s, you now have over 142,600 films, almost twice as many films, and it's creeping closer to 50% with lower ratings. 42% less than 6.0, and everything plummets to a 6.21 decade mean rating. Now, this only used titles with more than 1,000 user votes. So, okay, what does this all mean? Let's look at a visual representation here of what this all looks like. So, you have the 2010s making up almost half of all lower rated movies. Now, obviously, there weren't that many movies in the 50s and 60s or even 70s, but look at how the 1980s makes up such a small slice with the 1990s. I know the color's kind of similar with the 2000s and the 2010s, but the 2000s, 25.6, and the 2010s make up almost half of all lower-rated bad movies. So look at the 80s and 90s. Look at those champs there. Look at those champs. Again, I am postulating this is all due to cheesiness starting to be made fun of and looked down upon. Now, let's get to meta. So here's an analysis here, an AI analysis on meta films. So meta films involve self-awareness, irony, or films that acknowledge their own existence as a film, example, breaking the fourth wall, spoofing their genre, or commenting on cinematic tropes. These films became more prominent as cinema evolved, especially in post-1980s. So here's an estimated breakdown per trends on meta film. In the 50s, only 2%. Concept of self-awareness or irony was almost non-existent. In the 60s, 4%. Rise of experimental cinema. In the 70s, 5%, start of a more avant-garde and self-referential cinema, especially in films like A Clockwork Orange. In the 80s, 10% with the emergence of self-referential comedies like Airplane and Naked Gun. 90s, 20%. Meta films like Scream, which I actually went over this in the Final Destination episode. on how Scream was both the beginning of the end of the horror genre and also the revitalization of it. It was simultaneously both. And one of the reasons is because it was meta. The Truman Show and Pulp Fiction began to dominate by the 2000s, 25%. A rise in films that commented on the film industry itself, adaptation being John Malkovich. I think being John Malkovich was 99. I don't know if it was released in certain places in 2000. Is it 99 or 2000? 2010s, 25%. Films like Deadpool, Lego Movie, Cabin in the Woods continue to play with the boundaries of self-awareness and genre. Yeah, and that's one of the reasons I hated Cabin in the Woods, actually. A lot of people liked it. So now, let's look at a visual representation of the rise of meta. So you have here, isn't this a curious matchup here? So isn't this a curious visual representation here? So not identical, but you could see some trends now of percentage of bad films relative to total films and the rise of meta. And let me just double check the chat here. Lord Zed says the only way to fix this is for Clooney to be Batman again. Clooney's so dry, though. He's not really cheesy. Chin Chin says the controllers have had this all planned for over a century, in my opinion, setting up the whole of Western civilization for inevitable decline. Cheesiness broke the camel's back. Here's the thing, though. Like, okay, let's talk cheesiness, like with elementary school kids making fun of other kids for being cheesy. Where did that come from? Because I don't know where that came from in the mid-90s, because cheesy movies were still kind of cool, so I actually don't know what's behind the catalyst. I mean, the dehumanization and the moral degeneracy, obviously that's the string pullers. The social engineers, the powers that be, whatever you want to call them. But as for the chastising of cheesiness, even among children, I really don't know what's behind that. I mean, I don't know. We can talk about that. I'm about to unleash the piece de resistance of receipts here. Matari Sensei says, remember genuine love songs? Yeah, we can move on. We'll definitely touch upon music. But yeah, when was the last time you had a super cheesy love song? Like Amazed by Lone Star? Like, where are all those nowadays? Everything's like mumble rap trash or just uninspired. Just really uninspired crap. Gutter trash. That's all we have. Matari Sensei says expressing genuine sentiments would begin to be seen as corny and unattractive to women in particular, which would to influence men more and change the mating trends. Yeah, there was some of that, but like among children, I'm trying to pinpoint that. Because, yeah, I'm just really trying to think. Because even elementary school kids were making fun of other kids for being cheesy, or that's cheesy, or you write a short story, that story's cheesy. Anything with genuine sentimental value was seen as cheesy. There was this shift to be edgy and cool and dark and goth, among other things. Alright, who's ready for the piece de resistance? Yeah, 80s rock was awesome too because it was genuine. Satanic influence aside, it was genuine. Alright, here's the piece de resistance. Here is the correlation of bad films and meta films by decade. What a coincidence we have here. I mean, look at this. Look at the rise of meta and the rise of the percentage of bad films relative to total films being made. I mean, this is quite interesting. I mean, can anybody dispute any of these receipts? All right, before we have, I mean, Chin Chin says pretty damning graph. Now, I spent a lot of time on this. Like, I'm not exaggerating here. Like, I've been thinking about this for a long time. This is what I've come up with. This is where I'm at. Let me just read a blog post here from roughwriting.net. This is from June 30th, 2017. That's so cheesy. Okay, so when artists who are supposed to speak freely are afraid to be earnest. Earnest is another good word. Like, how much earnest art is there these days? Whether it's people pushing woke ideology or people afraid to be criticized, like, everybody's scared. Like, everybody's virtue signaling, everybody's scared. Who's actually being earnest in art? Everybody wants to make a statement in some kind of political statement or otherwise, instead of just making genuine art from the soul. Politics be damned. But that was status quo in the 80s and at least early 90s. You made art for the sake of it being the art, not making any kind of statement. I mean, some people did, but, there was still, there was some of that, but there's always some of that. But that wasn't the majority. So when artists who are supposed to speak freely are afraid to be earnest and do beauty and sincerity, you've got a serious problem on your hands. Cheesy makes people afraid to be emotional. And I won't have it. So, this is Patty Jenkins of the Wonder Woman movie, which is interesting. I haven't seen the movie. Supposedly it's like feminist garbage, but woke feminist garbage from Marvel, Disney, whatever. But that's, I gotta give her props for this statement here. Cheesy makes people afraid to be emotional and earnest and sincere, and that is true. And so this writer here on roughwriting.net, I won't either, Patty. Since when did sentimentality and heartfelt emotion become cheesy? I looked up the word cheesy in Oxford Learner's Dictionary. 1, informal, not very good or original, and without style, in a way that is embarrassing but amusing. A cheesy horror movie. But the thing, like, did the makers of all those slashers in the 80s, were they really embarrassed by their product? I don't think they were. I think they were having genuine fun in making their product. I think they were proud of their product and happy that so many people were entertained by it and thought it's fun and awesome. 2, informal, too emotional or romantic in a way that is embarrassing, a cheesy love song, a cheesy romance novel. And again, I would argue, I don't know about today, but back in the day, I would argue those authors were not embarrassed by their work at all, and neither were the readers. Like, another phrase, guilty pleasure. Like, why would it be a guilty pleasure to enjoy something cheesy? Matari Sensei says, may unironically, the Satanic Panic was the cause and all the edgy rock bands. Lord Zed says, you were called gay at school if you watched Seventh Heaven with your parents every Tuesday. Not that I would know. Lord Zed. Clark Rice says, I agree with Herc. There was a nexus of Married with Children, Roseanne, The Simpsons. There was a recalibration of crassness and internet etiquette where everyone says abusive crap. Yeah, I mean, that's another parallel issue, but, everybody, there's the making fun of the cheesiness. BB says, Amazed was a corny song. I didn't think it was. Well, I don't think it is either. I'm asking how come those songs aren't being made now? Like, even the alt-rock bands of the late 90s, early 2000s, like, what was it, Lifehouse? Hanging by a Moment, Here With You. I mean, that was a heartfelt song. Should I play that? No, that's going to get copyright. But yeah, no, that's what I mean. Like, you had actual heartfelt, genuine songs. Now, just the high commercialization, auto-tune crap. I mean, some people like Taylor Swift, but I just don't hear any soul in any of her music. And no, I have not listened to every single song, but I've heard, like, the clips in mainstream media. Three of a smile done in an exaggerated and probably not sincere way. She had a cheesy grin on her face. But here's the thing, though. Just because the cheesy grin is still fun and entertaining, even if it's not, let's say, organic. Like, even if you're making it just to make it, it can still be fun and entertaining without the fear of being cheesy. 4, smelling or tasting of cheese. Many times in my creative writing classes, an adult student writes a beautiful nonfiction piece about a mother or a spouse or a child that seeps in gratefulness and love. That student then downgrades her story by saying, but it's too cheesy. And sappy is another word. Sappy. For people that are having trouble with the word cheesy. Yeah, sometimes people chastise and view negatively things that are sappy, even though it's genuine human emotion. What makes it cheesy, I ask? Well, it's sentimental. There's nothing edgy in it, or dark, or negative. And why is that a bad thing? So when society decided that cheesiness was bad, and things had to be edgy, dark, or negative, that's the beginning of the end. That's my thesis here. So if we write, photograph, draw, paint, dance out of a joyful or inspired or thankful or heartfelt emotion, then that creative piece is cheesy, ? If we write about deep love or intense romance or extraordinary friendships, that's cheesy, ? Well, bring on the cheese. I celebrate sentimentality. According to Wikipedia, sentimentality originally indicated the reliance on feelings as a guide to truth. But current usage defines it as an appeal to shallow, uncomplicated emotions at the expense of reason. And see, that's why, again, I think part of this was planned, like, behind all of this catalyst, because it's so dehumanizing to separate yourself from your emotions and your intuitions and everything that makes you human, to be afraid to be called cheesy. Adam says, I don't watch a lot of films. I've never heard the term meta film. I'm not even sure they would call it a meta film. They would say a film that's meta. I don't think they're called meta film. Well, maybe. There's meta elements. Yeah, I know on the graph it says here meta films, but I don't think that's like an official terms like horror films, but films with meta elements. Clark says, the late 70s was the best, well-functioning analog technology, big, strong middle-class economy, good, fair, competitive boxing, great music, and cinema. I would see, again, you're a little bit older than me, Clark, I guess. I can't really comment too much on the 70s, but the 80s were so much fun, and the early 90s were kind of like the 80s. Matari says, we're not always rational beings. I hate when everything has to make sense to people and it's called bad writing because it's genuine human emotion. Clark says, it's all because of the transition from analog to digital. You lose it in the sample. You know what? That's a good catalyst. That is a great contender. I guess you just joined a little late. Another great catalyst is the transition from analog to digital. That's a good one. It's kind of hard to argue against that. That is another great contender for a catalyst. Aaron says, cheesy is not necessarily sentimental. In my opinion, it can be poor acting as in a poorly made film. Some spaghetti westerns were like that. Yeah, it's a broad term. I'm kind of using it as sentimental. Yeah, there are shades of meaning where cheesy could mean shoddy. Elaine says, watch reaction music videos. The best music was the late 70s. Yeah, there's a lot of great music from the 70s. I mean, I like a lot of music from even the 60s and the 50s. Even the 40s. Straighten Up and Fly Right. Nat King Cole. That was a banger back in the day in the 40s. I mean, you could hear the human spirit in some of that old music. But I would argue the 80s still had it. And some of the 90s, some of the early 2000s, although a lot less. Clark says, when you sample, even at a super high rate, you are losing the edge of the curve. It affects mass reproduction. Yeah, there's just something about good old-fashioned records. They do sound better. Billy says, young people will never know the freedoms we had in the 70s, 80s, even early 90s. Movies had kids in back of pickups. Now they would hold in jail overnight. Yeah, I mean, I would still argue in rural areas, even today, I mean, it's kind of tough. More like the early 2000s still had it. There were so many places in rural America in the early 2000s that were almost identical to the early 90s. Adam says early 2000s music is peak. Yeah, that was the last time it was still good, I would say. There was a little bit of real, genuine human spirit. I mean, you could also say the commercialization of everything would be a catalyst, but that was... When did that really start? Because that was kind of always around. It just wasn't as heavy-handed. But let me finish this article here before I get to an excellent clip, an excellent video clip that for some reason I just randomly thought of when putting all this together. So, call me old-fashioned, but I like using my heart as a guide to truth. In my thesaurus, sentimentality is called mawkishness, soppiness, schmaltziness, and sappiness. I say, bring on the sap. Without sap, would have no luscious syrup to spread on our dry pancakes or waffles. Sappy syrup sweetens up what could be dull and tasteless. That's a good point, because most media today is dull and tasteless. What about you? Do you like your creative spirit sweetened or dulled into political non-emotional correctness? That's another point, too. When political correctness kind of became over-focused on and promoted. Like, was there a shift? Like, what year was the shift? Was it Obama? Was the beginning of the Obama administration? Where everything just had to be politically correct? So that was just an interesting article from roughwriting.net. I haven't seen too much address this topic. But yeah, and a lot of it is too like an over complexity. I could add this to the meta. Like movies tried to outdo other movies instead of simply being good. Instead of just simply being good and genuine and entertaining and human and emotional and fun, they were always trying to outdo other movies. Like let's add 50 million plot twists. Now that could be cool. I enjoyed Inception, certainly. But it's like every movie's trying to do that. Like if there was, if like one filmmaker wants to do that, that's cool. That's awesome. That spices things up. That's super interesting and entertaining. But when every single movie tries to outdo other movies in the genres with a million twists, then you get the crap that we get today. Clark says, also in music, timing wasn't driven by a click track, but by interaction with the drummer. All those different music genres all had great analog drummers. Chin Chin says, no need for sap when you got fructose. Aaron says, I do believe the fear of cheesiness, sappiness extended as far as opera, so that acting was not as sincere. Modern opera singers now seem to be reversing that trend. Yeah, I don't really know much about opera, but that's very interesting, Aaron. So you would say so now that so has the pendulum swung so far it's swinging back now in opera? BB says, why am I watching this? You all might want to consider doing something higher-minded with your lives and constantly intaking pop culture trash from any era. It's the junk food of entertainment. You don't like being entertained? Well, first of all, I don't think I could watch any modern movies because that's all trash. But something that genuinely makes you happy and entertains you, I wouldn't say that's a bad thing. It's not like I mean, I can't speak for other people, but it's not like anybody's doing that's the only thing you're doing. I mean, you know, go out there, enjoy nature, enjoy the outdoors, enjoy talking to friends and family. I mean, that's a small portion of your life. We're just specifically discussing it for the purpose of this podcast as it affects life as a whole. For example, people in schools, like kids or whoever, they're making fun of other kids for being cheesy. Like, what's behind that? I think that's kind of important when we're discussing the catalyst for the decline of all of Western civilization. I'm just using film as one representation of this phenomena, so to speak. Justin Johnson in the house. Matari Sensei says, good entertainment is enriching and good for mental health. Yeah, I mean, you could even look, I mean, BB's already gone, but if BB wants, I could put the studies on the screen showing how entertainment can be beneficial. Now, obviously, it can be negative as well with all the, you know, symbolism and propaganda and satanic degenerate filth in it. But genuine good nature, wholesome entertainment, especially with like strong role models. Like that's another thing missing from anything post 2010 for sure. Where are all the role models? Like everything's all about indulging degeneracy and narcissism. Like John Cena, really? The Rock? I mean, these guys are goofs. You know, when you had cheesy Van Damme standing up for what was right, damn the cost. Now that's a role model. BB's Inquirer. Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. I mean, I would argue all of the arts are cool and can be enriching to your life. But yeah, no, I definitely wouldn't say watch reality TV or any of that crap. All right, so here's a clip that I think illustrates. Here's an individual we haven't talked about too much. Definitely needs a deep dive. But brace yourselves. Here is a video clip of a lot of what I'm talking about, and I'll discuss why after I play it here. Fair use all the time.
I love to have it, but it belongs to the Hong Kong government.
No, it really belongs to the people of China.
But Hong Kong can keep it in custody after 1997. We've been working together, eh?
Huh? You think I'm going to be working with you again? Would you like to ask
Everybody was comfortable fighting. Those cats were fast as lightning. That little bit frightening. But before the expert timing, there's a funky fighting man on the funky side of town.
All right, so let's discuss this a little bit. So this is obviously from the Jackie Chan classic Police Story 3 Super Cop. For those that have not seen this incredible masterpiece of cinema from 1992, released in the US in 1993, directed by Stanley Tong. This is one of Jackie's one of his best movies. Look at these stunts here. The only people that can compare, I mean, even Tom Cruise wouldn't do something like this. I know he was hanging off of a plane, but he had a wire, so he wouldn't die. Jackie here could literally die. And he actually did. I think he broke a bunch of ribs. It's coming up here in a second. But look at this, and look at this illustration of the indomitable human spirit. And even that joke about Hong Kong and the British, even though whenever things are a little bit politicized, like back in the 80s and 90s, it was done in a fun way, not in a deathly serious, everybody hates everybody kind of way. Lord Zed says, every time my friend slept over in 7th and 8th grade, we'd watch a Jackie Chan movie with my dad. It was awesome. Matari says, he apparently has broken almost every part of his body once. Yeah, I'm actually going to do a deep dive on Jackie Chan. We haven't talked about the Chan Meister that much. We've been talking mostly about Steven Seagal, and rightfully so, but Jackie needs his own, obviously Jackie definitely deserves a lot of credit for his accomplishments in the genre. Most of the stunts, like he did this one, but most of the stunts was actually done by a Chinese stuntman named Johnny Chung, the greatest unsung hero of Hong Kong cinema. He did most of the stunts people think Jackie did, but Jackie did a lot of them too, just not... Jackie maybe did 25% of them, which is a lot, because they're very dangerous, but Johnny Chung did most of them. Justin says, that's what also happens when you cross Seagal. Oh, man. Is Steven Seagal your favorite now, Justin? I think you said you take back half of the negative things you said about him. Okay, so let's continue here.
They were chopping them up, and they were chopping them down. It's an ancient Chinese art, and everybody knew that part. From the fainting to a slip, and a kicking from the hip. Everybody was kung fu fighting.
For people wondering, that's Maggie Chung on the left. And damn. Okay. But look how happy everybody is. Just look how happy and genuinely human people were back then. Like, watch the behind the scenes of, like, a modern movie now. Even a Tom Cruise movie. I mean, yeah, there's a couple jokes here and there. But most of it's kind of, like, forced and fake. Like, look at the genuine human emotion of these human beings making a movie here. When was the last time you saw something like this in a Hollywood film? Like, even on the behind the scenes. It's like everybody is so fluoridated and sedated. The human spirit's just not there. Not to mention most of the films are all degenerate filth now with no actual strong morals. Here you have Jackie making cheesy movies. I mean, Jackie Chan's movies were really cheesy. Justin says Bruce's second crush on the left, it showed. Yeah. Well, if you watch a lot of Jackie Chan movies, Maggie Chung is in a lot of them.
Those cats were fast as lightning. But before we
When was the last time you saw a cameraman not only being given the light of day by the behind the scenes crew, but this genuinely happy? And you'll see in a moment, I mean, this cameraman deserves an award himself for people that haven't seen this, but check this out here.
on a mission from Hong Kong. He said, here comes the big boss. Let's get it on. We took the bow and made a stand. Started swinging with our hands. I saw the motion made me skip. Now we're into a brand new trick. Everybody was
And unlike Tom Cruise, there's no safety cable there. Jackie just literally almost died by falling off the side of a moving train. No safety cables here. This is crazy. And this is where Jackie Chan gets hit by a helicopter. He gets hit by a helicopter. Something got snagged, so he couldn't get out of the way. He broke a bunch of ribs right here. Check this out. Justin Johnson says less cables than NASA. Oh, man. But the reason I chose that clip is just look at the genuine humanity here. Like, everybody's so scared. Like, everybody's walking on eggshells these days. Back then, people weren't afraid to be humans and show emotion. I mean, look at these stunts, are crazy. But even, like, joking around. When you watch actors joke around these days and behind the scenes, everything is so subdued, suppressed. It's like human emotions are dialed down like a 1. But back here, like, how can you not smile and laugh watching these movies from the 80s and 90s? Because they were so genuine, and you're seeing genuine human emotion here. Justin Johnson says, imagine Jackie Chan on a roller jet. Oh, that would be fantastic. If they got Jackie, Steven Seagal, throw in Van Damme with Alex Jones as the announcer commissioner. Oh, that would be so epic. Oh, man. All right, so, I mean, that's my thesis. I provided a ton of receipts with 100,000 data points on movies. I mean, what else can be said here? I mean, just look at this correlation. Like, and none of Jackie's movies are meta, are they? Truth Trollette says they had soul still, or some did, now not so much. Yeah, I think a lot of it is just like they're all drugged up. They're just so drugged up. Here, I mean, I'll throw some more, let's throw another receipt up in here. Like, a lot of Hollywood actors are liberals, so they clearly have, especially females, they have all these mental health conditions. Like, how much drugs are they on? Like, here, Maggie Chung. I mean, I don't think Maggie Chung was on any medications here. What does everybody think? I mean, Jackie possibly might have had to take some painkillers for any lingering injuries, but just look at the genuine human nature here. I'm trying to get some random behind the scenes shots here. Of just random Hollywood stuff. But here's just a random shot, like a behind the scenes shot from the new Twisters movie. I mean, let's see. I mean, just look how subdued everybody is. Like, look at their faces. They just, like, look at the difference here. I mean, they're just so zoned out. They look zoned out and drugged up, don't they? I mean, I'm sure I could find some more happy ones, but I didn't see this movie, by the way, but it's like, because Jackie Chan could definitely be described as cheesy. I actually can't even find that many, like, behind the scenes shots. They're kind of hard to find. It's actually surprisingly hard to find some. I'm just looking up behind the scenes shots of random movies. It's usually just like posed shots. But I don't see anything coming even close to this clip of Jackie Chan and Maggie Cheung. Yeah, I mean, I can't. If people can find something, I just can't. Everybody's looks like they're permanently zoned out or sedated. Clark says, I only watch Canadian TV. They had some good cheesy stuff back in the day. Chin Chin says, they look like they're clocked in at the worst 9 to 5. Aaron says, as cheesy as it may sound, I am finding that some modern TV and cinema from Canada is restoring genuine acting. I haven't seen anything recently. Back in the day, they did have some good stuff. Clark says, something tells me that Jackie Chan's knees, shoulders, elbows, wrists, ankles, and spine all tell him when it's about to rain. Lord Zed says, Jackie doesn't take painkillers, he likes the pain. You know what, let me look that up, because he's so present. I mean, he never seems sedated or zoned out. Like, Jackie's so focused. I can't find anything, actually. You know what's interesting is he said, wow. So he had a, yeah, apparently he doesn't. Because he said that he just has a lot of pain. So he said he started treatment in 2022 at 68 years old. He started taking medications. So it looks like he doesn't. I mean, that kind of explains things, because you could see how he gets bothered, like on a lot of the behind the scenes and the fights, you could see how certain things bother him. So apparently he started taking meds at age 68. Yeah, I mean, he's so genuine and in the moment present. I'm not really that surprised that he didn't take medications. Unless that's all a lie, but. Man, Justin is relentless on NASA. Looks like they just got back from the greatest achievement of all time. Are you referring to the twisters behind? I mean, Glenn Powell doesn't look that bad. He looks like he's okay. I mean, just look at the sheer joy with Jackie and Maggie Chung, though. I mean, this guy, I don't know who this guy is. So the guy in the red shirt, he looks like he's on a lot of drugs or just a lot of weed. But yeah, they do not seem present. Glenn Powell's the closest, but yeah, anyway. But yeah, just look at the sheer joy here on these people making a movie. I mean, Jackie really looked like he had the time of his life with his career. Oh, that's a creepy video, Justin Johnson. That is really creepy on masks. Definitely a topic for another podcast. All right, so anybody have any final thoughts here before we round this out? On my choice for the catalyst for the absolute decline of Western civilization, the chastising of cheesiness. Cheesiness being viewed as negative, and the rise of meta-analysis instead of enjoying the moment you're living in. The villainization of humanity and sentimentality and emotions. That's the beginning of the end, in the opinion of one Bruce McGuire. And how many people really rewatch movies from, 2010s onward? Even if you kind of sort of liked it, they just don't have the soul. You rewatch stuff from the 80s and 90s because it's awesome. Like Bloodsport. And Kickboxer. All right, I'm going to round this out with the greatest commercial of all time.
us, the Fresh Maker.
Truth Trollette says, why did I know this was the commercial? Chin Chin says, I want to buy Mentos now. Well played. Look at the cheesy grin on Van Damme, one of the cheesiest individuals of all time. Coincidentally, also one of the most entertaining. I mean, most of the Mentos commercials were actually really cheesy, but awesome and reflective of the time period. Also, another thing we didn't even talk about was like how colorful the 80s and 90s were, and then in the late 90s, everything shifted to like dark, goth, just no more bright, colorful, lively anything. And then architecture followed. Aaron says, Van Damme always seemed sincere to me. Yeah, I'm using cheesy in the sense of simply sentimental, but earnest and genuine in the sentimentality. That's how I've been using it this whole time. So thanks again, everybody, for joining us for another edition of the MindShock podcast. Plenty more to come on a variety of topics with, of course, logic and reason at the forefront, attempting not to fall for any logical fallacies unlike anything else out there. If you want to help support the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you subscribe, like, and share Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. If you're not getting notifications, you can sign up for the free Patreon tier as well. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time.